In this video, I'm going to talk about how to actually roleplay your character in the act of doing so. I'm going to be talking about using /say for dialogue, using /emote for your own custom emotes, how to throw dice with the best of them, and if you're new to roleplaying, I have a special challenge for you at the end. But first, everyone needs to learn how to walk before they can run. You've seen it in the cities, you've always seen those roleplayers walking around while everyone else is running. So the first thing you're going to want to do before you do everything else is find out whatever button on your keyboard it is that toggles your walk and run. You'll want to go into the settings menu, the preference menu for whatever game you're playing, look at the keybinds, and look at for whatever button it is that makes you toggle your walk and run. While you're in there, you'll also want to set up a keybind for auto movement, for auto moving forward. You probably already have an auto run configuration, and that's a good thing to use in conjunction with your auto walk because there will be times in role-playing where you want to walk and talk with others. And that will free up your hands to be able to use the chat box, have your character walking side by side with somebody, and still able to converse. And then while you're in there, you're also going to want to look into a nice keybind for drawing and sheathing your weapon. Find a comfortable place to put that on your keyboard. I usually use Shift X and Shift Z because I typically don't bind skills to those, and I'll use Control a lot for actual skill binds, for playing the game. So something that's convenient and easy for you to use. Anything else you think that would be comfortable for you. When it comes to role-playing, /say is one of the most important things. It's a way in which you express the dialogue and speech of your character. When someone's reading a novel and they start to get a bit bored, where do they start skipping ahead to? They tend to skip ahead to the next point of conversation. Dialogue is so important when it comes to role-playing, and it's so easily overlooked. And yeah, I think that a big part of your focus, especially starting out as a role player, should be in having solid dialogue. Just think of all the short stories you've read that were just two people having a dialogue back and forth. No descriptive text, just dialogue. And how they can tell so much of a story just through the use of their speech alone. You start to recognize people in novels from the way they talk, whether they have an accent, certain word choices, things like that, abbreviations, shortening their words or drawing them out, or intentionally saying things differently, or maybe there's someone who just uses tons of metaphors and expression. Well, /say is the place where you want to do that. Now, /say, you probably use it already if you're brand new to just kind of chat with people around you and mess around. It has a very short proximity in most MMORPGs, so depending on the MMORPG you're playing, you'll want to look at the /say or whatever equivalent that they happen to have there. /say usually is a shorter proximity, just people in close range that you can talk to. When you're actually using dialogue and roleplay, you'll want to surround that dialogue with quotation marks. And that's very helpful to kind of add structure to it and kind of make it stand out so people know specifically that you are actually speaking in character. When it comes to speaking out of character, a quick note on that, you'll want to surround your text with parentheses. That lets whoever's reading it know that you're speaking as a player out of character as opposed to your character themselves. And the other thing with dialogue is that you can combine it with your custom emotes. And of course, as I talked about quotation marks around dialogue, that's a very handy place to add custom text to your custom emotes. Dialogue is so important for expressing a character, their speech, their mannerisms, the way they address people. Do they use formal language? Or do they use really rough language? Are they very vulgar with lots of cursing? Or maybe they have a very lazy way of speaking where they shorten a lot of their words. One of my characters was very nerdy, and so she always tended to typically use technological words and programming kind of terms and stuff like that. And of course this was in a sci-fi MMORPG, and so it kind of really fit that element. And all her expressions were programmer expressions and things like that. That's your dialogue is so important and critical, and it's just so easily overlooked at the very start. /say is so easily overlooked for newer role players because they tend to go right to the custom emote writing, which is extremely important, and I'll talk about that. But never neglect your /say. Super good, super critical. Now let's talk about custom emotes. Most of your role-playing and interacting with the world and with others is going to be done through custom emotes or your dialogue, and custom emotes is super critical when it comes to expressing your character. Depending on the MMORPG that you're playing, you're going to want to know how their emote system works. I know in Final Fantasy XIV it's /emote or /em. And in SWTOR it's /emote or /e or /me even. World of Warcraft works a bit differently. Some MMORPGs don't actually have an emote things, but those are more rare. Those are usually for MMORPGs that typically don't have role players anyways. Elder Scrolls Online, Guild Wars 2, they usually have an emote command or a role-playing channel where you can kind of act out your characters through there. That becomes critical in expressing your character. And I say when you're very new, just focus on brevity and clarity. Clarity so that people easily understand what it is you're writing, and brevity to not burn yourself out. Now, if you want to over time become more elaborate, or maybe you're already proficient in writing, you can go ahead and have some of those longer emotes, and that's completely fine. But if you're just starting out and you're kind of new to it and you're new to writing your own emotes, just keep it brief, keep it concise, and keep it clear. Those custom emotes are ways in which you interact with others and the environment. You know, if you're searching for something, you'd use a custom emote. Walking into a room, you know, after physically walking in and then announcing your presence through an emote so people can kind of see and get a feel for your character, you can do that. Picking up a drink and taking a sip from it. You know, fighting and combat. In the roleplay environment, it's typically not, you know, when role players fight in combat, you're usually not running out and killing mobs or raid bosses. That's what a lot of people think role players do, but most of the time they're not doing that as far as role-playing combat. You're usually typing out your actions on the screen. I can talk a bit more advanced about more dynamic flourishes to add to your roleplay in a future video, but when you're starting out, I say keep everything concise and to the point and direct. It's very common for newer role players to become extremely descriptive, and you don't have to do that. You don't have to become extra wordy to kind of take the next step up in writing, but rather you want to make sure you're focused on the expression of your character. You know, being dynamic, adding a bit of spice and sauciness to the way in which your character interacts with the world. And that usually just comes through very brief writing. It doesn't have to be elaborate to be expressive. It's in the things your character does, how they act, how they treat people, how they stand. When they walk into the room, do they speak loudly? Are they rough? Do they grumble? Do they growl? Do they yell at the top of their lungs? You know, things like that. Your slash emote's going to be super major for expressing your character and interacting. Finally, you're going to want to learn how to roll some dice in case you want to be part of a guild that does that. If not, that's fine. You don't have to worry about it, but dice help introduce a bit of chaos to the formula. It helps bring some balance. You know, for example, if you're fighting with someone else, I know it's very common to say that you emote an attempt to punch somebody in the face. You know, remember that you probably are familiar with the old Nixium video in World of Warcraft, funny stuff. But the idea is that you're not god moding other people. But a lot of times without dice, people tend to become a bit of god moders, or they just become invincible to where they're avoiding everything, and no matter what you do, they manage to have the perfect answer to it. So dice, especially in the structured role-playing format, help provide a bit of equilibrium to where you just throw dice against each other. Even something as simple as a d20, and whoever rolls higher wins, and if you tie, you just re-roll it. Even something as simple as that can be expressed through dice. Super easy way if you want to start dueling people and through role-playing PvP, where you use emotes to battle it out. Just roll a d20 to see who gets initiative. Higher roll wins. If you tie, re-roll it. And then for your attacks, you just type your emotes, throw your dice, and the other person throws their dice to see if they can beat or meet your dice. And then if they can't, they get hit. And then it's their turn to attack. And maybe you go for three attacks landing total. Something like that. Well, dice are nice agents of chaos. They take things in directions we don't necessarily expect. It can be a lot of fun. Sometimes when it comes to me making newer characters, I'll often roll a d20 or a d10 to kind of figure out, you know, some of their things that they like or don't like. For example, if they eat new food, I'm usually quietly rolling a d10 to see how much they enjoyed it. Higher number means they love it, lower number means it was worse. Things like that. So it helps take some things in directions you may not expect. It's good to understand the dice system of whatever MMORPG it is that you are playing. In Final Fantasy XIV, you have two options. You have slash dice, and then you can put your dice in that you want to roll. For example, slash dice 2d20. We'll roll two 20-sided dice. It also happens to have slash random. Slash dice has to be used in either a party with other players so they can see it there and it's isolated to the party. And it also has slash random. That's broadcasted to those standing around. Kind of like slash say is in proximity. Your slash random is in proximity in Final Fantasy XIV. So you can do slash random 2d20 to roll your two 20-sided dice. Things like that. Some MMORPGs don't have it. Guild Wars 2 I do not believe has it, and Elder Scrolls does not have it. Many times if you're in a structured role-playing environment where they want to introduce dice, they'll typically have a dice rolling bot on their Discord. So you typically go, you're playing the game and you have your Discord open, hop over there to roll your dice and then come right back. Something to kind of bridge that gap if the MMORPG doesn't provide it. So thankfully, some of the really popular ones are more prone to include some kind of dice system. So it's good to know. Google around for whatever MMORPG you're playing and see what the dice command is. So, a challenge. If you're new to role-playing, I do have a challenge for you. If you've been following along from the overview to the creation of a character and now through this video, you should have everything you need to start role-playing. You should be able to hop right in with your character, maybe have a character sheet on your phone or whatever. You've worked down a bit of the backstory, even if it's just the bare essentials. And now after this video, you should have everything you need to get right into it. And so if you are new, I have a challenge for you. My challenge is going to be that you interact with two different people. Two different people, or at least, two different groups of people on two different occasions. So it kind of gets your feet wet. Not just one interaction, but two interactions total, if you're new to it. It's as easy as walking up to people and sending them a private message and asking them, hey, do you want to roleplay? And of course, you'll see it. You can recognize the role players in whatever game you're playing. In Final Fantasy XIV, we tend to have RP tags when we're actively engaged in role-playing. You just find someone, send the message, or just walk right up and just jump right in. So go ahead and do that. The reward is making friends. Much more fun to role-play with other people than just by yourself. So if you're brand new, go ahead and work on that. Very easy to make friends in the role-playing community. Lots of great people there. There's a playlist on screen now for other MMO role-playing videos that I've made. More to come soon, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks.